Hello YouTube, it's Lion here with Hobbies of a Man once again, and before we start, I want to shout out Rechi. I think I got your name right, I'm not sure, who is a new manga tuber that I recently found, who has content I really enjoy, and the interactions we've had online are really good, so I'll leave his channel in the description, and I'll put him in a card as well. And I also want to shout out DGWYT, DGW YouTube, who's also another new manga creator, Mangatube creator, who I really enjoy talking with. So his link will also be in the description and in the card. So please go check them out and subscribe to them. They're pretty cool. And they just started their YouTube career, so it'd be nice to help them out a little bit. Now, today's review is going to be on Overlord, Volume 1, as you guys can see right there. It is written by Kagane Muruyama. It's illustrated by Soben. It's published by Yenon. Actually, physically, it's published in a hardback format, but I own it digitally because the hardback is $20 and I don't want to spend that kind of money on a single book. This features aspects of dark fantasy and isekai, and it's a seinen title, or at least the manga is. Which, speaking about manga, it has an anime and a manga adaptation, so there's different ways to consume the content. So the premise here is that we basically have to learn about this new world after our main character, a regular salaryman, gets transferred into the world as an undead lich lord, after he got stuck in the video game that he was playing because it was the last day of the server being up before it got discontinued. So he arrives into this new world. He finds out that he's the Lich King that he used to play as in the other video game, and that the whole guild of monsters that he was in charge of also came with him, and now he's in charge of them as well. And then we just spent the time exploring a little bit of this world. Now moving on, I look at 5 things in my reviews. I look at plot, character, world building, art, and fan service. The first 3 are my objective take. The art is purely my opinion, and fan service is for those of you that don't like it. I'm warning you ahead of time so that you don't have to read it. And yeah, so the plotline here is really good. I really enjoyed how it kind of came about. There's a lot of different perspectives, but they all kind of function as a way to lead us into one specific event that ends up happening. So we get like 4 different perspectives, if I remember correctly, that all lead to the same event. And we get a cold open with action that then comes back later near the end of the book as a kind of, oh, this is where we left off kind of thing. I like that sort of situation that happens in books, so I enjoyed it. And basically the plot line is, as I mentioned in the premise, this guy gets stuck in this new world as an undead lich. He's in charge of this dark guild. He has to figure out how to remain in charge of it because he doesn't know how much autonomy these characters have, these NPCs that he and his friends built have, compared to their loyalty to him that's, like codified into them. So he has to act a certain way. He also realizes that due to the fact that he's no longer a human, his emotions are different than how they would be normally, and he has to also deal with that. And then we have him essentially fight for the sake of a human as a way to get information. Now, this is all very vague. There's a lot more stuff happening, obviously, but that's kind of where I'll leave it off. But yeah, it was really interesting. Really enjoyed it. It definitely hit more on the darker side of fantasy, even though it did keep a lot of those fun, kind of ridiculous aspects of Japanese comedy that I really enjoy. So it was a really interesting reading experience, and I really enjoyed how everything kind of came up. So yeah, now the characters are also really good. They're serious. They have these moments of really interesting development, but they're also really ridiculous, off-kilter almost, but in a really funny way. We have Manga, who is the main character. He also goes by Ainz Al Ghul. He's the undead lich. He was a regular human, got transported. Now he's this monster, and he's dealing with the fact that his emotions are no longer the way that he thought of them as. And so he has to kind of mentally compensate for that to act the way he wants to. So it's really interesting. We have Albedo, who is like his second in command. She's in charge of all the other monsters. And she's also like a crazy yandere for Momonga, which is really fun. I really like that aspect. I think it's really funny. even though it'd be super psychotic in real life. But yeah, we have Arabella and Marabello, who are these like lolly characters, or lolly and shoto characters, but they're like dark elves and they're like kind of old, but they're really fun as well. They kind of play off the twin thing as well as like cross-dressing. I like them as characters. They kind of help us humanize Momonga a little bit, and the demons as in general, or well, they're not demons, like the monsters in general. And then we have a knight character. There's a lot of more characters, but the only other one that was relatively important is the knight. I can't remember his name, but he is kind of like the good guy that's going to experience betrayal from Momonga, but it's not really betrayal, it's like lack of information. And so I'm excited to see how that plays off in future volumes. Nothing really happened with him yet, but he owes Momonga a debt, so that's that, I guess. But yeah, the characters are really interesting. They're relatively deep. They are not exactly like the most deep, but they're at least different from other general archetypes. Momonga is kind of like that chuny fantasy come to life kind of thing, but there's also very serious psychological repercussions of the fact that he's no longer human. So it kind of balances out to this like serious take on being resurrected as a demon lord. And yeah, it's just a really enjoyable take on these character archetypes, I guess, which I really enjoyed. Now, the world building here is probably my favorite part. I don't think it's the best. There are other light novels that do it better, but here we kind of rely on the it's a video game world crutch, so he doesn't have to explain everything, but he does explain a lot anyways, assuming that you don't know about video games. So this actually does fit really well into the lit RPG aspects, where, you know, there's serious discussion about levels and time management and how you have to think critically, and how skills and items and all of these things affect you as a player, and a lot of that type of stuff, which I find really interesting, even though I'm not a big fan of video games. And then we also have a really interesting development of culture and kind of like kingdoms in this new world. So I thought it was really cool. It's definitely on the darker side of things. Like, this is a world where like shitty things happen, and they just going to happen because that's how life works. It's not, all wondrous and mystical like in other more traditional Western style fantasy. So I really enjoyed that aspect as well. But yeah, the world building is really great. I really appreciated it for what it is. And yeah, so now the art here. The art is really interesting. I'm not sure I love it, because it's a lot of you get impressions of what things are, but you don't really know what everything is. It's a little unclear, which, fair if that's what you're trying to go for, but I would prefer much clearer takes on the book, so that's just me. Here's the spread of the characters, which I really like this. This art piece specifically is really clear. I really enjoyed it. And then here's how the world works, kind of. This is the Great Tomb of Nazarick, as you guys can see. It's really nice. I really do like the graphic scale, I guess, like the theming of the art, but I'm not necessarily sure the execution of it is always the best, because there's a lot of times where I'm just looking at it and I'm like, what is going on? Now, this is a very clear one of Albedo, but I don't know, it's not sharp. It has a lot of gesturing in it, I guess. Like, I don't know how to explain it, because I don't know enough art terms to really say what I'm trying to say. But basically, it doesn't feel crisp, if that makes sense. It's not muddy either. It's not unclear. It's just like not sharp. It feels almost out of focus, is what I'm trying to say. And that's kind of what it feels like to me. And I'm not exactly the biggest fan of it, but it is an interesting aesthetic choice, and I appreciate it for what it is. It kind of reminds me of stylized like church stained glass things. Well, I mean, I don't know if that's actually common in the US, but yeah, like those really nice big panes of glass that are all different colors, and you kind of get this image that isn't necessarily clear, but well defined. Like you can tell what it is, even if it doesn't look, you know, like a photograph. That's kind of what it reminds me of. So yeah. And then fan service, there's very little. There's none shown in any of the drawings or any of the art pieces, but it is mentioned a few times. There's a few like things that are said here and there that can count as fan service, but overall it's pretty minimal. Now my rating here is a 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 10. I feel like I say this too much. I give this rating out too much, but I just really enjoy everything I read, or most everything I read. So yeah, it took me forever to finish this book actually, but it's really enjoyable. I just couldn't read it very often because it's the book I have on my phone for whenever I'm like just sitting there and I have extra time. I'm just like, okay, I'll pull out this book, read a couple pages of it while I wait for whatever it is that I'm waiting for. So it was actually not part of my to be read pile, but I just finished it and I was like, okay, it's time to review it. So yeah, I really recommend it. I think it's really good. I haven't checked out the anime, so I don't know how it compares, but usually the source material is better, so read the light novel instead. And the most similar things I can think of are Shield Hero and Danmachi, or Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.